Cool. Thanks so much. Hi, guys. Hope you're all well. I'm going to begin by asking what sort of stage you learned of a potential spin-off, and if you remember what your initial reaction was.
Sort of in stages, really. The sort of idea about doing a potential spin-off was sort of mooted to me relatively soon after Sally and I left Death in Paradise. You know, I guess 2018, something like that. Of course, these things take years to put into action, and I was very interested in, you know, because I love the character and I loved, you know, working with Sally, and I love the storylines, and you know, I love everything about the show and the character. So you know, I was very keen to, sorry, there's a fly, to you know, see what happens after the happy ever after, the reality of people's lives when they step outside that chocolate box that is, you know, all wrapped up nicely at the end of a show. So so it was mooted to me then, and then sort of COVID happened, and so I kind of forgot about it. And then I think at the end of 2021, the BBC commissioned a script, or maybe it was a little earlier than that. Tony Jordan and Tony wrote the first script, and I was like, well, it's all very well, but we don't want a Death in Paradise in Devon, you know, because that's, I'm not sure that's you know, that's a bit lazy maybe, and you know, and I think the things that make Death in Paradise quintessentially such a popular show, I mean, one of the big things about that is the Caribbean, is its setting. So as beautiful as Devon is, and it is, and then, you know, it's not what people necessarily want to see on a cold January night. They want to see people drinking rum on the beach, and, you know, after they've solved a dastardly murder. So but when I read the first episode, I was like, sold. This is brilliant, because it holds the DNA of the original show, but it's completely unique and it's completely different. There are no murders in the whole series, you know, but you retain the puzzle, which makes you know, crime shows interesting. You retain the sort of the team, the sort of police team, who are sort of quite quirky, and each has their own distinct personality, brings their own thing to the solving of the puzzle. And then you have the personal relationship between you know, Martha and Humphrey, and now Anne, Martha's mum. So, and it's a much more personal journey, I think. You retain the fun of the puzzle and the lightheartedness, but it's also dealing with a lot more personal issues, which I think is braver in a way, and I think obviously makes the show entirely of its own, although it retains a good link to the mothership, if you know what I mean. So
yeah, because Sally, as we see in episode 1, your arc is kind of tonally quite different to the rest of the show. It's very profound and quite moving. So even though it's dressed up in what is quite a playful kind of show in some regards, do you always have to treat the character from a real place of humanity to do her story justice?
Yeah, because I'm handling a sensitive storyline. So yeah, so you can only try and play it as truthfully as you can, and there is a lightness of touch, like Kris said, you know, in the police station, and that's one of the things that's lovely about Death in Paradise as well. But it can only be played as sensitively and as sort of truthfully as possible when you're doing storylines like that, I think.
Yeah, because Barbara, I mean, with Death in Paradise, and now Beyond Paradise, the Paradise franchise, they have this wonderful ability of combining kind of irreverence with severity to be really funny, but have real crimes at its core, with real victims that needs to be resolved, which is quite a tricky tone to get right. Do you, as an actress, just have to give yourself to the writers and directors and editors and just trust that they'll sort that side of things?
I'm not sure what you mean. You're talking about Death in Paradise, or you're talking?
Oh, no, I'm talking about Beyond Paradise. I'm just saying.
Okay, the crimes. Well, Anne doesn't really come in touch in too much detail with the crimes at all. I'm sure she'd be very, very interested. There, in the first episode, she does. She is asked her opinion, but she does. I mean, I'm sure she'd interfere much more if she was allowed. But I think yes. I mean, when you're given a storyline and you're given, it's up to you to try and find a way through it, and the way that the writing has been presented is really interesting, because it's not heavy-handed, and it presents things that are really quite awkward, and nor does it make it sugary. I mean, there could be a mother-in-law who absolutely adores Humphrey because lovely, wonderful, adored daughter loves Humphrey, but she finds him difficult or bewildering or baffling, because he is so different from the world. Where so all that is so well written and so well presented, and so that's a lovely area to explore, because there's a sort of honesty to that, and also all these storylines that the as Sally says, the difficult ones, the ones that really aren't really dealt with maybe in the sister ship, will have a great appeal to everyone, because because of the way it's presented with a light hand, and I think it will be a great plus for the series.
Yeah, because Kris, I mean, the role of Humphreys, he's that sort of Columbo meets Harpo Marx. I'm just wondering, because is it quite an actual tough role to play? Because you have to do this, because you do this successfully. You have to give the impression of someone who knows more than the viewer, and yet always appears like he's winging it. I mean, there's a moment in The Trip when Steve Coogan and Rob Brydon are talking how the very best actors are the ones who know something that the audience doesn't. But then they say sometimes actors feel like they don't know something that the audience does know, and you have to do both. Is it quite tricky in some ways to play this role?
First, I have to say, Stefan, that's a great question, and I will do my best to answer it. The answer. So it is difficult in some ways to walk that tightrope of what is ostensibly. Well, his name is a great indicator to me, as always has been, because his name is Goodman. So he's a good man, but this whole sort of thing that he has. I mean, I've always struggled. Well, not maybe struggle isn't the right word. Toyed is a better word. Toyed with the idea of how much of it is an affectation, how much of it is. I mean, because sometimes I come into work and go, he knows more than he's letting on. So how much of it is an act, like Columbo in a way? Columbo was a bit of an act, and it's a disarming mechanism to then draw in the perpetrator and then, pounce like a sort of cat, a sort of detective cat. So, but then on the other hand, I sort of struggle with the idea of like, well, if he's doing it as an affectation, that's quite considered. It's quite, I don't know. Is it a bit too? Is it a bit too manufactured? Does it sort of change his dynamic somewhat, or is it that he just sort of slowly by sort of a process of retains all this? Crazy figures and facts through little pieces of paper, and then slowly they all come together in his mind eventually until a sort of picture suddenly appears. And I think it's that. So, but as an actor, I mean, I guess, well, I think the thing I found, I think because he has a certain amount of pathos, so I think it's not that hard to make the jumps between, the lighter hearted stuff, as long as it's not too broad, I think. And what I really love about Beyond Paradise especially is even the sort of klutzy stuff is quite subtle. So it's not particularly broad. Well, I think when you first see him and he's hanging out of a tree, you go, okay, right, it's going to be a bit broad. But then it actually becomes quite gentle and quite subtle. And so so I think he retains a bit of pathos. And so so when you have to do those scenes with Sally, with Martha and Anne, and then it becomes, because of the truthfulness to everything, it becomes it's okay. You're not having to sort of backpedal quite so much. So I think it's fine.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, it all works. Thank you so much for your time today, guys, and best of luck with the release of the show.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys.
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yes.
Nice.
Hey!